Michael, one of the things you told me about when we were talking this morning over breakfast is that learning to write was just essential for you. And Michael has written 7 books. I asked him how many books, and he went, he had to count. But he's written 10 books for other people who came to him and, who he met when he was with prison, a lot of times white-collar criminals who had a real story to tell but didn't know how to tell it, so he wrote their books. So that means he's written 17 books. But you were saying you really didn't honestly know how to write a coherent English sentence when you began. But why did you feel that writing was the essential magic wand?
Well, first of all, I was in prison, and I was surrounded by a 40-foot wall, an impregnable wall that I couldn't see out of, and I knew that if I didn't learn how to transcend that wall, that would be it for me. I would be limited to what I experienced in the prison world. And in the prison world is a message of failure from my eyes. That's all that I saw. Pick up a knife. Forget about the outside world. Run with your race. I didn't even know what race I was. I never got involved in prison politics. I didn't have any idea who am I. All I could see myself as was an American citizen. And I wanted to be an American citizen. I thirsted to be an American citizen. So whatever it took, I had to figure out how am I going to reach people and have people see me as something more. And if I didn't learn how to use a pen, my world would be restricted to that prison. And so I really admire programs that go into prison that emphasize writing, like Inside Out Writers, who are impressing upon our young people, learn how to communicate. Because if you can learn how to communicate, you can change the world. We've heard the cliche, the pen is mightier than the sword. Well, it's true. It's absolutely true. If we can learn how to communicate, I knew that someday I'm going to sit across the table from my probation officer, and I need her to see me as being sincere, as being authentic. And so I tried to create this record. And writing was an essential skill. It was an essential skill, and it's been invaluable. Here I am, 60 days out of prison, and I'm in a different district with permission from my probation officer. I think the first week I got out of prison, I was in Los Angeles teaching with total support from my probation officer. It doesn't happen by accident. That's the message for me, is to show people, if you document the journey, it's an essential part of our program. Document the journey. It teaches people how to document the journey, how to connect. You succeed.
It still blows my mind that this is day 60.
Yeah, 60.
Of being out from under.
People ask me how I'm doing. How can I go wrong?
Seriously. But you said something interesting. I know that you are a maniacal documenter. I mean, I look at your blog and it's like, got up this morning, got my wife off, but that you have documented your process. So on one hand, you're saying writing allowed you to communicate to the world and say, I am something more than the worst thing I ever did. But how did it help you organize yourself to, hold on to hope, to
Sure.
not respond to the cycle of failure?
So I heard very early on, I interviewed a warden. I was in graduate school at Hofstra. And I had at that time, it was, until I got married, it was the most amazing experience of my journey through prison. I had a lot of mentors in prison. One was this guy named John DiIulio, who some of you may know, who work in criminal justice. He is one of the people who's had a change of heart. I connected with John DiIulio, incidentally. He was a professor at Princeton. Wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal speaking about, some of you may remember this horrific term called the super predators are coming. Right. And John DiIulio wrote an article that was titled, Let 'em Rot. And it was in the back page of the Wall Street Journal. I just graduated from Mercer University. I was starting a program at Hofstra, and I wrote to him and I said, Professor DiIulio, I want to introduce myself. This is why I disagree with your article. This is why I think we need to change the way this wave of incarcerating is the answer for people. I spoke about the racial injustices. I spoke about the intergenerational failure that I saw. I said, we need leaders like you to see it differently. And he wrote me back the most amazing letter. I remember getting it. It came under my door, and I held the envelope, and I remember fingering, Princeton University. Wow, it's so amazing. And this guy's writing me back in prison. And he said, I agree with everything you say. He said, as an op-ed piece. I don't have much room. He said, if you'd like, I'll send you some books that I wrote. I wrote extensively about the project. I'll send you some books, and we can debate. He sent me the books. I disagreed with them all, Governing Prisons, Escape from Prisons, and I wrote them, and I told him why, and he became a mentor of mine. So he started to, the highlight of my journey, I'm talking 8 years into my sentence, I taught a class at Princeton. He brought a class into the prison where I was held, and I got to teach these undergrads who were studying prisons, and it was me and the warden and John DiIulio moderating, and it was a real highlight of my life. And this message of documenting the journey and how did it keep me focused? It kept me focused because I continued to have this incremental success. And through these words that I would write, people would start seeing me as something different from the bad decision. That's the message that I'm always trying to share. That's why I began documenting very early, because I always believed someday I got to show somebody else how I did it. Even today, people will write to me and say, well, how are you going to help all the other people who don't have your discipline? I said, I am helping them by showing them how hard I have to work. I got news for you. I'd love to give you, Julio said yesterday, don't tell me what I want to hear, tell me what's real. I can tell you the news I'm hearing, nobody gives. I got to think of another word here, a hoot. A hoot.
My mother used to say.
About somebody getting out of prison. What do they care about? They care about whether you're honest, you're rejecting criminal lifestyles, and you want to be a law-abiding citizen. If I can demonstrate that, people are going to see me differently. That's what I got to show people.
Well, you know, hearing all these stories again reminds me of one of the other things that I've been dying to ask you is, it's really easy to point to you and say, yeah, this is fine, but you're the exception.
Yeah, I hate
you
that.
got, you got a degree in prison, then you got a master's, then you actually helped to change the mind of one of the architects of the super predator theory. That's not the norm.
But it is the norm.
But wait. But so what I want to know, and I know that, but what I think it would be great to hear is, when were your lowest moments? I mean, you are so good at holding on to your focus.
Yeah, well.
But I know in the beginning you had, when you actually got convicted and you didn't think you would, you had a big crash, and I'm presuming when you got your sentence. But what about over those 26 years? Were there, dark moments? Were never all.
Sure.
And tell us about one
moments?
or two.
Well, the biggest moment was not when I was, in fact, getting convicted was a liberating moment for me.
Okay.
Actually, when I read the book of Socrates, that was an extraordinary liberating moment. I found my purpose in life. I said, I'm going to do a lot of time. That's okay. I'm going to find a way to create meaning.
But tell us about the ordinary moments that cannot help but come at times.
The tough time came, I would say the first big tough time came when the warden stopped my education, because I really wanted to earn a PhD. I really wanted to get a terminal degree because I felt that would help me inspire more people. I said, you could become anything you want to become.
Well, so what happened to you emotionally?
Well, it took probably 4 months. I'd say, I had an unusual prison experience. I don't think it's extraordinary that anybody can't do it. But when it happened, I just recognized, okay, I have to figure out another way. If I can't get a PhD, what am I going to do? That's when I began writing. And when I began writing, it took me a few months. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was an exercise fanatic in prison, so I exercised a lot, but I said, I just can't. He stopped me at 8 years. I still had 18 years to go in prison. And education had been my solace. It had been as the young man said, it was my way to come back. I totally identified with him. It was my way to come back differently. And when he said, you can't get a PhD, I thought, oh my God, that's the end of the world. But then I just started looking around and exercised for a while. Then one of my mentors invited me to write a book, and I thought, wow, that sounds extraordinary. That sounds like fun. So I did that, and then that led to me earning a living in prison. I earned a living in prison. I supported my wife in prison. I paid taxes in prison. And they charged
Writing
me.
books for other people.
Writing books for other people, writing books for myself. I played a role in the market when it was on fire, and I was so proud of all of these things because I was earning taxes, and of course the prison system was telling me I couldn't do it. And I used to say, you know what? My goal is to be exactly what every taxpayer wants to come out of the prison system. It is not to follow your prison rules. I really don't care about being a model inmate. I was never a model inmate. I was always focused on becoming a model citizen. Big difference.
That's an interesting point. It was. How important is it to focus not just on succeeding outside, but you had a focus on, as you said, being a model citizen, on somebody who made a positive contribution. How important is that? That's a leap beyond.
It's one of the three prongs. Three prongs were educate yourself in meaningful, measurable ways, which I considered university degrees. I had to do something that people would recognize. 2, contribute to society, because I wanted to reconcile with society.
Why does that make a difference for someone's recovery and success?
Because you will no longer see yourself as a prisoner. You see yourself as a citizen. And that was the currency for me, to have people see me as a citizen. When I would get letters from college students who were reading my work, or a distinguished professor like Joan Peters Seeley says, hey, I used your book in class. And I said, really? Wow, that's amazing for me. And I wasn't a prisoner. And when a lieutenant would come into me and say, hey, I'm locking you up for this, I'd say, time out, dude. I'd say, I'm okay with that. Do what you got to do. But I said, I want you to know, I'm proud of what I do. You got gangbangers in here, you got dirty cops in here, and you want to mess with me? That's okay, because it just helps me spread the message. The mass incarceration, when we have this blinding adherence to our policies and our codes, and oh my God, it says you can't do this, well, that's perpetuating a system of failure, of intergenerational failure. And I was totally okay whenever they locked me up and shipped me. I don't know how my wife responded to it, a lot more difficultly than I did, but it was all part of the journey for me, and it was a journey that was okay.
One of the things that struck me this morning as we were listening to the kids talk about, how they came to get these amazing scholarships for four-year university, but their backstories, as is true with an awful lot of people in this room, are filled with trauma and damage and abuse, and sexual abuse, physical abuse, seeing friends killed. Fill in the blank. Things that do profound damage and trauma, create trauma. You had stuff that led you into choosing Tony Montana instead of Socrates originally as your psychological mentor, but you didn't have abuse and violence in your family. So how does someone get past those wounds to the place where there is no longer that lethal absence of hope? How do they get to hope?
So I can't say it anymore. I don't remember the man's name that's behind.
Chris.
Is it Chris, the reality changers? When he said, let them see, give them a vision of becoming more than that. The problem is when people live without hope, this is the elixir of human life. It's really what changes all of our perspectives and change. And if we can change that perspective and show a person, you can become more. And that's why these are the heroes that we need to invest in showing that message and seeding that throughout our inner city communities, throughout our prison systems. We're going to see fundamental changes in society. We've just got to communicate that message. That's what my role is, being an ambassador for those who are in struggle. When I teach at San Francisco State, one of the first lessons I do in my class is I teach the allegory of the cave, of Plato's allegory of the cave, where it shows that if we only have a certain perspective in life, and that's all we've seen for our entire life, that's all we believe is real. Until we can unmask and change that perspective on people, we're going to have the same pattern over and over and over again. And so we need people who have actually lived through it, come out differently from what anybody would expect, deliver that message into these environments. We can change two sets of minds. I change people who are incarcerated minds, and I try to change employers' minds. That's my role, is to be a liaison between these two bridges, and show an employer, hey, if they go through this program, this is how they're going to come out. Understand what is his pain. What is the employer's pain in hiring somebody with a criminal background? If I can understand that, I can solve it. Understand what is this person's pain, his trauma. If I can make, or her trauma, if I can help her to see that she can overcome, like the amazing ladies who won last night are able to do, then we're all playing our role. That's just what I believe we have to do. We have to show these amazing stories, like I heard from this incredible guy, Mr. Lewis, who influences hundreds of people, and he's an inspiration to me. Or I really talk about Sammy, because to me, I am bootstrapping this. I mean, I am just starting. 60 days out of prison. My vision isn't this. It's to someday be like those guys. So I can bring a panel up. I said, these are guys who went through the straight A guide, and look at them now. They're the CEO of this company. They're not window washers. They're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing that, and anybody can do it. That's my job. 3 years I'll be back, and I'll show you that crew up here.
It's great. Julio, how are we doing for time? Do I have time for 1 or 2 more questions? Okay. And they all collided at once. As you know, California is in the midst of being supposedly going to come up with a plan to give to the 3-judge panel and the advocates to say we can, in fact, reform our prisons to reduce our population. If you were made king or given a magic wand and you could reform the CDCR in one big way, what would it be?
I would fundamentally change the way we measure justice in this country. We talk about restorative justice. We've heard a little bit about it here. I would fundamentally change the way we measure justice. Right now, we measure justice in 2 ways that are extraordinarily flawed. We have communism. We've been pointing our finger at communism across the country and how evil it is. Communism is thriving in our prison system, where everybody's given according to his needs, everybody serves the state, everybody's told what they can and cannot do, okay? But they come out into a society that is different, where people earn liberty. And I would fundamentally change the way we measure justice instead of the turning of calendar pages and the avoidance of disciplinary infractions, because that's all that matters in our prison system. Turning calendar pages and avoiding disciplinary infractions. Nothing else matters. I may have got my master's degree, but it would have made no difference if I spent all of my time keeping up with the Kardashians. I would have got up the same day. And when we have that type of a message in prison, there are far more people gravitating to the gangs. But if we told people you can earn your way to liberty, we serve taxpayers better. If we can show people you can earn liberty through your expressed commitment to living as a law-abiding citizen, to becoming the best that you can be, and to reconciling with society. That message is absent. That's what I would change. I would encourage somebody to earn freedom. We've started with SB 260, the leaders who started that. We need to have that throughout our system, and we don't have to wait 15 years. It's when my wife is a nurse. When somebody's well, we release them from the hospital. When somebody becomes well and contributes to society and demonstrates their commitment to living as a law-abiding citizen, we should have a mechanism in place for a review and an opportunity to come out. So that's what I would change.
One last question. You brought up your wife, and you've talked about these relationships, with different people, like Don Peter Cilia. You got all these amazing endorsements, which I recommend you reading on Michael's website. But you also were contacted by and ended up marrying your wife, Carol. And naturally, when I met Carol, I went, so how'd you guys get together? I mean, forget the policy stuff for a minute. Let's talk about love. She and Michael had met when they were in 5th grade. And then at the 20th reunion, she heard that, she was in charge of finding out what was going on with different people, and she heard that this kind of wild boy was locked up. So out of curiosity, she got a hold of you. But what was fascinating to me is that Was it difficult for you to open up to that degree to another person? Not the intellectual opening up, but
totally.
that other
Carol,
thing. How did you get past that?
Carol was a woman that wrote me initially to tell me what a bad guy I was for selling drugs. And I said, yeah, it's true, but that was 15 years ago. I've changed.
It's a nice opener.
It was an opener, and it led into a romance. And I remember her communicating to me some messages that I just found to be really normal inside, because by then I'd already been interacting with hundreds or thousands of people. And she would ask me, aren't you angry? Aren't you angry at the people who testified against you? And the reality was...
She asked you about feelings.
No, we didn't get to feelings yet. This is how the feelings came into play. This is how our relationship, I think, transitioned. When she asked me, aren't you angry? And I told her, no, I don't harbor anger to anybody. I put myself here. I'm going to find my way out. These guys didn't testify against me out of malice. They were just trying to survive. And I chose my choice. They chose their choice. And they're still my friends. And so that led her to say, how do you live that way? And I said, I live that way because I want to be better. I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. And that's how I genuinely feel. I had no anger. And so that led to a romance. And our marriage through 10 years was nurtured in a room no less public than this, but not as friendly. And, where I couldn't kiss her other than when she came in and when she left. And, it's the families who suffer through prison. Mm-hmm. She suffered far more than I did. Prison for me at that time was a second skin. But for her, it was a new environment, and she's the greatest story of my life.
Well, now, I'm going to slip in one more thing.
Okay.
Is there anything that anyone could have done to reach that kid who idolized,
I wish
Tony Montana?
I would have known Reality Changers.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If I would have had that message of somebody that's telling me, hey, you don't got to pursue this path. And I had every advantage. Really, I did. I mean, I could have done better. And it's with great sadness that I caused this pain to society and to my parents. And my father passed away while I was incarcerated. And my parents didn't speak to me for years, and I just felt this shame, but it was really because I lacked character and values, and I really could have used the leadership that I see in so many people here, and I wasn't willing to listen, and I was a bad kid, and Carol was right not to talk to me when I was a kid. That's the story.
And now she follows you around from place to place.
She moved 20 times every time, because every time a book had come out, the media would write about it, and they'd lock me up and transfer me. So it was.
I think we could go on forever. This needs to be a mini-series, but
so,
thank you, Michael.
No, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really helped me.
Thanks, Michael. You're just great. It's just so good.